Here's everything you need to know about my time at Sandrock, including its release date, gameplay, story, and details. My Time at Sandrock is a role-playing video game with life simulation, crafting, farming, and exploration gameplay elements. A new world harkening back to My Time at Portia, players will get to explore an open world, with new friends and enemies that players can engage with, both in the game's main story and side quests. Here are all of the information you need to know about My Time at Sandrock, including its release date, gameplay, story, and details. My Time at Sandrock will have its full release date on November 2nd, 2023, for the PC through Steam, GOG.com, and the Epic Games Store, as well as on PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and the Nintendo Switch. The game has been in early access since May 26, 2022, on PC. The game was developed and published by Panthea Games, with publishing support from PM Studios. My Time at Sandrock has similar gameplay to My Time at Portia, so fans of that game will feel at home in this new world. The game lets players live in a workshop that they need to rebuild from being a rundown facility into a well-oiled production factory, allowing them to explore the game's robust crafting system that gives players access to the game's various tools and decorations. These tools are used in different tasks that players can take part in, from farming, cooking, dating, decorating, dungeon exploration, carpentry, and more. Players can also create weapons that they need to use to defend the town of Sandrock from monsters, featuring the game's new defense break mechanic. The town of Sandrock also features 30 new characters for players to get to know, spend time with, and form relationships with, and oftentimes celebrate festivals with them. Players can choose the length of days to allow players to pace their game to their wants. There are a lot of things players can do in Sandrock, and the world is their oyster. My Time at Sandrock lets players take on the role of a new resident of Sandrock who has come to the town to inherit a rundown workshop. The city needs new builders and has even sent out ads about it in newspapers, and you're here to answer their call. Arriving in Sandrock, you are immediately met with commissions to do, helping rebuild the city and its buildings and structures, and later on improving upon them to make Sandrock a much better place. From there, players get to forge their own story by taking part in the game's main campaign and countless side quests. Twist on the Robin Hood story, Gangs of Sherwood reframes the English folklore classic in a futuristic dystopia, albeit one that still hews closely to the basic essence of the original tale. By abusing the power of the mysterious Philosopher's Stones, the Sheriff of Nottingham has amassed an overwhelming arsenal of technologically advanced soldiers, airships, and more with which he is used to oppress the good folks of Sherwood and beyond. In order to break this iron-fisted rule, Robin of Locksley, together with his erstwhile companions Marion, Friar Tuck and Little John, must do what they do best by robbing the rich to give to the poor, helping them in turn to lay waste to the vast armies of the Sheriff of Nottingham and restore peace to the land. Gangs of Sherwood is a third-person, co-op action-adventure designed in mind for up to 4 players to take part in the dismantling of the Sheriff of Nottingham's vile regime. Far from being a ponderous, plotting sort of affair, there's more than a dash of devil may cry about the whole thing, as Gangs of Sherwood very much prescribes a resolutely furious, hyperkinetic and combo-focused take on melee and ranged combat that fans of Capcom's stylish demon battling series will surely recognize. Building upon such violent pursuits, Gangs of Sherwood cooperative play is factored directly into the proceedings thanks to the 4 very different characters that are on offer. With each of the playable heroes offering a veritable mixture of melee skills, ranged damage proficiencies, tanking style abilities, support buffs, and more besides, having players that know how to best leverage those skills in tandem will be essential to taking down Gangs of Sherwood's various bosses and challenging encounters. When it comes to the progression side of things, Gangs of Sherwood doesn't disappoint either. Dovetailing directly into that whole good old-fashioned tale of Robin Hood stealing from the rich to give to the poor, not only can you spend the various amounts of cash that you have accumulated on numerous equipment upgrades to bolster your resilience and damage output, but so too can you donate your loot to the poor townsfolk of Sherwood, unlocking a range of exclusive ability augmentations in the process. Finally, special shards can also be collected during battle, which can be used to amplify and customize the damage of your attacks even further still, providing ample latitude for maxing out your playstyle in the process. Arguably sitting at the heart of Gangs of Sherwood are the 4 very different characters that you can pick from: Robin of Locksley, Marion, Friar Tuck and Little John. With each one essentially fulfilling a functional role within the group that aids one another, here's everything you need to know about each of the playable characters in Gangs of Sherwood and what they do. Robin of Locksley. The ranged specialist of the group, Robin is capable of stringing together combinations at a distance thanks to his rapid-fire bow. In addition, Robin also has a number of attacks which provide different results in battle, such as launching enemies into the air, exploding groups of foes at once and so on. In terms of unique abilities, our man Robin can also conjure special star arrows to appear in the middle of battle if certain conditions are met, allowing him to ramp up the damage of his existing projectiles as a result. Elsewhere, Robin's rebel ability allows him to unleash special attacks without penalty for a brief period of time, while his rebel instinct special allows him to both reduce incoming damage and increase outgoing damage over a set period of time. Marion. A well-rounded assassin that can deal high amounts of damage from either melee with her devastating chainsword or at range with her trusty throwing knives, Marion is a versatile fighter, to say the least. Marion's special abilities include magnetic daggers, which stick to her foes, which can then be triggered for a massive explosion, damaging any enemies that are nearby, while her rebel abilities all revolve around increasing her damage throughput and allowing Marion to stack even more magnetic daggers onto her hapless opposition. For anybody looking for a decent balance of ranged and melee attack playstyles, Marion absolutely has you sorted. Friar Tuck. A massive battering ram of a man, Friar Tuck is a slow-moving melee specialist that juggles the functions of singularly high damage attacks and damage absorption with aplomb. In regards to the latter, Friar Tuck can use his gargantuan shield to protect both himself and his friends from incoming attacks, while his substantial strength permits this rowdy monk to remove heavy obstacles that in turn provide the group with access to new areas and loot. Friar Tuck's abilities are centered around massive slow strikes, which create AoE-style shockwaves, which in turn affect other enemies, while his special abilities, which allow him to taunt and gain the attention of stronger enemies, will prove invaluable in Gangs of Sherwood's more difficult encounters and boss fights. Little John. Formerly a card-carrying member of the Sheriff of Nottingham's posse, Little John has since seen the error of his ways and is very keen to correct them with his furious brawling attacks. Very handy with his knuckles, to say the least, Little John not only uses his fearsome steel fists to blast enemies across the room, but he can also shoot flames from them to boot, while also being strong enough to heave up his enemies and toss them onto their own traps. Little John's special abilities are all centered around the timing of his fist-based attacks, where successful timings result in an overheat ability that not only stacks on top of his usual damage, but which can also be deployed as a devastating ranged attack as well. Dead Island 2 fans eagerly awaiting more post-game content won't have to wait much longer, with the arrival of its new DLC, called Haus, just around the corner. Haus is the first of 2 Dead Island 2-story expansions that could quench many players' thirst for more zombie-slaying carnage with its death cult faction focus, additional weapons, and tools. Using over-the-top deadly weapons to hack up zombies is all part of the fun in Dead Island 2, as something that perfectly complements its unique, procedural flesh system that one-upped the gorefest from the original game. Fans wanting to know what happens next in the story may also be keen to discover more about the new weapons to use while exploring the various settings and biomes of the mysterious Haus location, and what these could add to the gameplay experience. Dead Island 2's existing zombie-slaying arsenal is bursting with all sorts of weapons with different rarities, like Dead Island 2's legendary weapons, and many weapon types feature deliberately excessive designs and abilities. As listed in the Epic Game Store, Haus adds 3 new weapons to the roster, including a tactical crossbow named K-Rossbow, a cleaver-like melee weapon called the Hog Roaster, and a mysterious additional entry called Dead Islands, something that enables players to take the weight off their shoulders while they smash the undead into oblivion. Players also get 8 new skills cards, but no further specifics are available yet. While the precise nature of Dead Islands remains unclear, early footage shows the crossbow and Hog Roaster in action. K-Rossbow makes little noise, but delivers a head-crunching blast effect upon impact and features a scope to zoom in for those all-important headshots. Although an unreleased crossbow got mined from the game files after Dead Island 2's release, Haus is the first time all players can use an official one. In contrast, the Hog Roaster looks like a custom Dead Island 2 melee weapon, complete with blow torches for some nasty explosive damage, a massive tooth-shaped blade, and even a spit roast design that is likely reflective of the new pig boss, which looks like a crusher variant. Although the rarity status of the new Haus weapons is currently unknown, they could shape as something special as a focus point of the DLC offering, especially when considering the possible horror approach the DLC could take. Fewer zombies seen in the footage could give more opportunities to build tension and add stealthier gameplay moments with the crossbow, plus the possibility of killing zombies with even more style with the Hog Roaster and Dead Islands. It will also be interesting to see if any might tie in with Dead Island 2's autophage with the additional new skills cards. While these could have the most potential to impact the gameplay, the new weapons could give players more novel and fun ways to kill the undead. Additionally, Dead Island 2's game-changing Haus faction could influence the weapon and tools experience, depending upon whether players are only fighting zombies or, potentially, humans. While pure speculation, it's also possible players could fight other characters with autophage abilities, such as Lola Conrad and her group of followers, potentially making for a spectacular boss fight. This makes sense considering suggestions circulating that Haus may well belong to Lola. Either way, Deep Silver probably has some more surprises for what's next. Hopefully, more details will be available soon as the DLC launch approaches. Dead Island 2 is out now on PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X/S, with the first DLC story expansion Haus launching November 2nd. Indie developer Darkpoint Games' debut project Achilles, Legends Untold has been in early access since May 2022, and has since seen some major content updates and overhauls before its official 1.0 release this month. As much as the term Souls-like is thrown around nowadays, this game is unfortunately another unimpressive take on From Software's formula. The caveat here is that Achilles, Legends Untold uses a Diablo-esque isometric point of view and combines some loop-based progression in its overall gameplay loop. So is this indie action RPG that takes on Homer's Iliad worth your time, or is it an easy skip? To no one's surprise, you assume the role of the legendary Greek soldier during the Trojan War, Achilles. A doomed battle with the Prince of Troy, Paris, leads you to your death only to be revived magically by someone. Looking at old footage of the game, it seems that you are resurrected by the god of death himself, Hades, but for some reason during my playthrough, this entire cutscene was missing. Honestly, the story takes a back seat for the majority of the time, as most of the game has you working towards regaining your fame and power. You do meet tons of mythological names along your journey though, such as Castor and Hector. What's interesting is that you're given an option to either spare or kill a character after defeating them, although it's not explicitly clear what narrative impacts it has, other than potentially changing the ending. The voice acting of said characters is serviceable at best, but mostly a letdown. The overall gameplay loop boils down to large open area exploration with tons of different paths to go down, enemies to fight, and chests to loot. Sometimes you'll even find an occasional cellar mini-dungeon reminiscent of what is done in Diablo 4. For the most part, exploration is fun and rewarding, as walking down a side path always rewards you with a chest or two. A fair share of side quests can be stumbled upon as well, in addition to other rewarding activities to engage in. There is cooperative play available, but unfortunately that feature wasn't enabled during the review period. An early criticism of the game when it was still in early access was the absence of an in-game map, as it was very easy to get lost without knowing how to get back to the objective or a nearby shrine. Thankfully, the developers have implemented an intuitive map on the right-hand corner of the screen that maps out the path towards your next main mission. There's a diverse variety of locales to visit and explore, ranging from derelict ruins and cities to poisonous swamps and snowy mountains. Combat is a mixed bag, coming from someone who enjoys challenging Souls-like combat. For starters, the lock-on system works against you, as it makes the game frustratingly hard when navigating multiple enemies at once. The game does feature some special abilities such as a kick or Kratos-inspired shield throw, but overall it doesn't do too much to break the mold of the genre that From Software pioneered. Achilles, Legends Untold follows the classic formula of stamina-based combat, dodge rolls, and enemies that hit like a truck, albeit from an isometric, bird's-eye view. You drop your experience upon death and can rest at dedicated shrines of Hades to restore your health at the expense of respawning enemies. What makes combat an absolute chore is the insane amount of input delay in every movement. To make matters worse, sometimes the dodge registers, sometimes it doesn't. The same goes for attacks as well. I know this because I've tested this extensively on one particular enemy over 20 times to see if it was just me or the game itself. It's definitely the game. It doesn't help that there's no concept of poise in the game either, so you'll be interrupted out of all of your moves, and that all the enemies, even the weak ones, are damage sponges. Combat is also not consistent when it comes to staggering an enemy out of their attack animation or not, so it seems like a random ordeal. The game boasts its proprietary GAIA, Group AI Action, system that governs AI cooperation within the environment, but I had several instances where the AI would just bug out and run in circles or have pathing issues. The frustration of combat becomes exacerbated when you face groups of enemies, as you can easily get stun-locked to death, and you can't dodge through them. It doesn't help that the original key bindings are extremely awkward, with the sprint ability being mapped to holding the spacebar instead of left shift. I could go on and on about the little gripes I have, but this about summarizes the main ones. Instead of the traditional RPG progression of using experience to level up stats such as vitality, strength, or endurance, Achilles uses a headache-inducing skill tree that bakes those aforementioned stats into it. The skill tree is modeled like a constellation of stars, with each star being a node on the tree. Most nodes in the tree are bland and boil down to +1 on agility or other equivalent attribute, whereas some others grant you new abilities, such as parrying. You can't unlock further nodes until you connect the surrounding ones preceding it, so it's gonna take a while before you get a special cool ability you want to try. I'm not sure why the developers opted for this approach instead of a more classic one, perhaps for the visual flair of the constellation, but navigating it makes my head spin. In terms of weapons and gear, they can be found via chests scattered across the game world. Expect single-handed swords, axes, two-handed great swords, shields, and spears. These come color-coded in the classic looter style of gray, blue, purple, and orange for different rarity levels. You unlock the blacksmith a few hours into the game, who can upgrade your weapons for you at the cost of raw materials. There's also a bare-bones crafting system that lets you make healing items and throwable consumables. The recommended system requirements for Achilles, Legends Untold isn't too high, with a GTX 1050 as a minimum and a GTX 1660 as a recommended GPU. Playing this game on an RTX 3080, I had decent performance, though I expected a lot better given my PC specs. The load times are undoubtedly fast, even upon a fresh launch of the game, but I had frequent FPS dips to the 40s, even with DLSS turned on. Graphical settings were bumped up to epic, but even then, the graphics don't look very good, with blurry character models and environmental objects.